I'm Lisa Spector. I'm a pet calming maestro and a pianopreneur. So the former is I've combined my love of dogs and cats and pets with my talent of music, and I use that to help improve their lives. And the pianopreneur is because I have a history of turning my music talents into businesses.
We read in your bio that you were shy as a child and that your fingers became your voice. Can you explain what you mean by this and how that happened for you?
Sure. People that met me later in life, more recently, can't believe that I was shy as a child, but excessively shy. Like I didn't talk at all. My parents brought me to a child psychologist when I was 4 because I wasn't talking yet. And they thought something was wrong. And this child psychologist said, she's fine. She's just a late bloomer. She'll speak. When I was 7, I found the piano and I felt like it became my voice. I felt like it was my way of expressing myself when I was too shy to say anything. And I stayed shy for about 30 years and I let the piano really become my voice. It really felt like that was my total way of expressing myself.
So, what changed for you after those 30 years?
A variety of things. I got out of, all I did as a child. I mean, I grew up on a piano bench. Really, I didn't have any other interests. That's all I did. That's all I wanted to do. Anything else irritated me. I just wanted to be at the piano. Then I went to school, and school was Juilliard. So school was, you get rewarded for being at the piano. So I spent more time at the piano. And all my friends were pianists. I didn't even go beyond pianists. It wasn't even violinists and singers. It was like we talked about opuses and crucial numbers, and we talked in music lingo. And then I moved. Grew up in upstate New York, and I went to New York City and went to grad school in LA. And then I went back to New York, and I ended up in California in a teaching job teaching music at Santa Clara University. And then things started to open up. I started to get other interests. I was in California. I started hiking, and I finally had a friend who wasn't a musician. Honest to God, it was like my first good friend who wasn't a musician. And I think that and getting married at the time and then having just broader interest, and that expanded me. And that I would say like my early 30s, I got out of my really excessively shy stage.
So, how did that relate to your performing life? Because I know you did a lot of like international playing and competition. So, how are those things playing out at the same time?
The performing life and particularly the competitions, because you go to another country and it's so fascinating because you're in this world of pianists from all countries, and you get to notice, oh, the Italians have wine at lunch before they're going on stage at 4 o'clock. And the Russians are like, oh my God, their brain power and their like ability to focus. But I find it so intriguing to ask them, like, how do you feel like they could be shot on stage and they still keep playing. Like I was in Sicily in a competition, and it was outside of a kitchen, and there's noise and there's all these distractions. And these Russians were like rock solid. I said, how'd you do that? They said, Lisa, that's how we grew up. We grew up and like we practiced. There were pianos in the same room. It was cold. We had no heat. So they just dealt with all these distractions. So I just found it really interesting to start to dive deeper into the mindset of these pianists and the different cultures, which is just so mind-boggling and interesting to me too. And then I was traveling to other countries, so I got to just had times where I left the piano and got to explore. So that kind of opened me up and expanded me also.
Did you think that these new experiences away from the piano started to enhance your playing at all? Or did you ever have that thought?
I'm not sure I had the thought at the time, but looking back, absolutely 100%. You cannot be a good musician if you don't put your instrument down. It's impossible. I mean, the only way to be a good musician is to live life. I remember when I was growing up, I had a teacher for about 10 years from my childhood up until I went to Juilliard, and she was so fabulous. She really set the foundation. And there was certain music I wanted to learn, some Schumann And she said, "You're not ready. You haven't lived enough life yet." And, you know, as a 16-year-old, you don't know what that means. But as you mature, you realize what that means. So like, she's absolutely right. I wasn't ready to play, you know, the wonderful Schumann and late Beethoven and some late Brahms. I just wasn't ready.
When you had these kind of eye-opening experiences, and when did the entrepreneurship come in for you?
My life has always worked that the best things come in by seemingly accident. And of course, I don't believe in accidents, so they're never really right. But at the time, things come in and I just pay attention to what's there. I was teaching at Santa Clara University, and it was about, at the time, it was about an hour commute. And I was just tired of the commute, and some things changed in my life. And I was walking by, honest to God, this is how this happened. I was walking down Main Street in the town I live in, Half Moon Bay, and I saw this property for rent. It was commercial property. And I just thought, well, that would be interesting. I was teaching out of my home also. And I thought, this would be interesting if I opened a music school and had it here. Kind of, that's how it all started, and ended up leaving the Santa Clara job and opened the music school. Had that for 14 years in my community. And while I had that music school, I started taking classes and studying marketing, which I always hated. Now I can't believe it. I hated it because I love it. But at the time, I just hated it. And it was a stretch, you know, so started taking business classes and learning how to run a business.
How was that transition for you, going from being this like full-time pianist, strictly performer, to now being a business owner?
It was a gradual switch. So at the time, I was performing a lot. I was at the age where I just passed, you know, I was in my 30s. So you know, competitions, you only have so long, right? And usually it's a pretty young age. So I'd kind of passed the age deadline for that. So I started performing more locally and got really involved in my community. I still live here all these years later, this beautiful community town of Half Moon Bay, south of San Francisco. And oh my goodness, there's so much advantage I started to learn if I just connect with people. And that music school expanded, that actually became a concert room. I actually expanded the space, the room area next to it got available for rent a few years later. So then I had like a part music school and part concert venue. And so every month we had a themed concert. So here I was the performer some of the time, and then I invited performers in, and sometimes if they were a singer, I'd accompany them, or sometimes they were a soloist, and whatever it was. So I got to really use my music skills and then combine them with my entrepreneurial skills that were just building at the time. And it was fun because it was the area that interested me.
Yeah, and that's so cool that you were able to connect with your community in a meaningful way and get that human connection, which we all talk about in music so much.
Right. And I
Yeah.
realized the power of word of mouth. Like, I did not have to advertise hardly at all. I think the first 6 or 8 years I didn't advertise. It was just completely word of mouth. And it's a wonderful thing when other people who love what you're doing can just promote you.
Yeah, that's the best kind of marketing. So when did you realize that you could combine your love for dogs with your music?
So that was another accident, so to speak. It was at my music school. So I had a wide range of students. It wasn't only kids. I had 4-year-olds, classes of 4-year-olds, and then I had to 88. Honest to God, 4 to 88. And these 4-year-olds I loved, they were so fun, but they were pretty wild. You know, they'd come in yelling and screaming, and they just wanted to play. And then I also had like really fatigued, tired 16-year-old boys coming in after high school, like, you know, wanting to just go to sleep. And so it was a challenge. So because I love dogs, I was a volunteer for Guide Dogs for the Blind. So I was a volunteer puppy raiser, which is the best volunteer position ever. Highly recommend it. And so I had this 4-month-old yellow lab puppy who went with me everywhere, including to work. And of course, you know, I had a crate for him at work also, but I joked later on as he grew up, because he was career changed. So I got to adopt him and keep him as my pet. But I joked that he got me all my business because the students just love him so much. But it was a challenge when I had the 4-year-olds coming in and they were so wild. And then I had a 4-month-old puppy who was, you know, pretty rambunctious, and I had to settle them all together. So I went to a seminar learning how to use music, certain prescription of classical music, to really help focus children and really calm them and get them focused. It worked like a charm on the 4-year-olds. And I looked next to me and the 4-month-old puppy would be just snoozing in no time. I was like, this works. Like, I gotta look into this. So it all came out of that idea.
That is so funny, that image of just you having that moment of like, oh wow, this really works. Everyone around me is calm. I love that.
Right. It's great on the kids, but look at this.
Out of curiosity, is that like the prescription, or like how you prescribe the music? Is that like, you know, is it you play something kind of slow and calm? Is that how it works?
So this has gone through many stages. So where I am now with music is a little different than where I am then, because at that time there had been one research study on dogs and music, and that was done in 2001. And that was done by an Irish behaviorist, Deborah Wells. And she did it actually in San Francisco, but she lives in Ireland. And it was testing different kinds of music on shelter dogs. It was, I believe it was classical, a control group with no sound, pop, heavy metal, and jazz, I believe. And classical, no surprise to me, classical music calmed the dogs. And so that's great. But you're classical musicians, and we know classical music is such a generic term. It is written over 400, 600 years, depending on who you ask. It's one instrument to 150-piece orchestra. It's opera to and fast tempos to slow adagios. And you know, if you're like in the car listening to classical music, you're constantly adjusting the volume. You know, it's like huge range. So classical music playing for dogs is fantastic. It's a start, but it's too broad to test classical music works for dogs, because what specific classical music? So I've gone through stages with this. In the early stages, I used in my 10-year history when I had the idea and then co-founded Through a Dog's Ear, it was based on testing of 4 varieties of classical music and using psychoacoustics with altered classical music that was simplified, lowered, and slowed down. However, since then, we're now talking about 2003, and then Through a Dog's Ear I launched in 2008. So now we're talking about a whole bunch of years later, a whole lot more research has been done. And other research actually shows that classical music that's not altered, it's still slow, but it's not altered, calms the canine nervous system in the shelter environment and even relieves anxiety issues. But again, classical is so broad. So I more recently have taken what I call the right prescription of classical music, one instrument. And I think any of these 4 instruments would work based on the ability to play the lower range, because lower frequencies calm the canine nervous system. So I think piano, guitar, cello, and harp are the 4 instruments. If people say to me, oh, I'm a violinist or I'm a flutist, and my dog comes by my side every time I practice, because you're attached to your instruments. Dogs will do anything. They'll bend themselves backwards to be near us. They're pack animals. They want to be with us. So yes, they will do that, but it's the higher frequencies aren't always the most conducive to calming. Now, higher frequencies are great for stimulation. So it just depends on what you want.
Wow, that is so fascinating. Like, just all of that it's really fascinating, and I'm just really curious. You know, like what else you've learned. Like, how does it feel to know that your music is now in all of these shelters and calming all of these dogs?
It brings me to tears. I thought I wanted to play Carnegie Hall. I didn't know there was something better. This is better. I am using my music talents to help improve the lives of dogs and increase adoption rates in shelters. I didn't go to Juilliard for this. I can't imagine anything more rewarding.
The impact you've had is just huge. Like,
Thanks.
that's amazing.
Thank you.
So you've created multiple albums, right, of the music now?
So I'm no longer with Through a Dog's Ear. I left in 2018, but when I was with that company that I co-founded, that then became Icon Pet, we created, I believe, 16 albums for dogs and then cats, and Noise Phobia series with Victoria Stilwell, who is a very famous celebrity dog trainer. So a combination of, yeah, lots of music for senior dogs, music for puppies, music. Yeah. So that puppy I talked about at the beginning, his name was Sanchez. He did not make it as a guide dog. So I got to adopt him. He became my pet. He helped all the stages of that company because I was creating music for him. So that when he became a senior, it went into senior music for senior dogs as well.
That's so cute. He was your little test subject.
Exactly. Now my test subject. So when he was 7, I adopted Gina, also from Guide Dogs for the Blind. Her 12th birthday is today. It's June 9th when we're recording this. Her 12th birthday. So she's my, you think she'd be a senior dog because technically she is. She's a Labrador, so she's a big dog. She's not senior in behavior. She's like, this dog, people think she's 12 months, not 12 years. She's still running agility. She's still, this weekend, she got a 2nd place in agility. She's like, it's incredible. I've been told it's the music. I don't know, but I've been told.
Yeah. How did you know, like, how did you you started making these CDs and then how'd you get it out to all these shelters? How did you know it was making a difference at these places? Like, how did that transform?
So I personally ran in the shelter initiative. So that came out of, before I volunteered for Guide Dogs for the Blind, I volunteered at my local shelter. And I saw firsthand, I walked the dogs, I socialized with them, and I saw firsthand how much they needed it and how much stress they were under. Now, this was a long time ago, before shelters, a lot of shelters that have had the budgets have improved their sound environment. So it's much quieter, but in those days it wasn't. And it's, you couldn't even go in and have a conversation. So I personally, myself, single-handedly started this out by, in those days, may have been before you were very young. And I don't know if you remember when everything was in CD format. And so I personally postage stamped and mailed these CDs that went out to shelters. It was a free program for shelters, just, sign up here, and I'd send them all. And then I'd call them and I'd say, how's it going? And they would tell me. And this one shelter manager from Ohio called me in tears and said, Lisa, you don't know. This is the first phone conversation I've been able to have in the shelter because the dogs are quiet. And he told me the story of this dog. Oh, it was named after a football player. I forget, but he got adopted. He'd been there a year, and he got adopted because it was the first time he was calm enough when people were visiting. And also what happened within time is that the music is also coming for people. So people would stay longer, visitors would stay longer, which would cause adoption rates to increase.
That's beautiful. How did you get the project involved with the CBS early morning show? How did that come about?
Another seemingly accident, right? So I started this project my publisher was Sounds True. I just can't say enough for them. Tammy Simon is the founder and CEO, and just fabulous company. And so they took on this project, dog-friendly work environment. And we had a PR agency, and they had set up this trip for us to go to New York City to present for some of the people, for the dog people competing at the Westminster Dog Show. And so we were staying in the same hotel. It was a long time ago, 2008. I don't remember all the details, but the event we were going to perform and present at literally got canceled a minute after I boarded the plane to leave for New York. a minute after I boarded the plane. So I missed the phone call saying, don't come. This is canceled. I'm in New York, and I land. It says like it's been canceled. So I've always had this thing about I turn lemons into lemonade. I even have an album called Left Hand Lemonade. We'll talk about that later. So this whole thing just was like this incredible opportunity of things coming in at the right time, and I was in the right place. And we filmed it at Steinway Hall. I arranged that, and we just got this enormous press opportunity that it was so beyond anything that could have happened at Westminster. So yeah, it was pretty remarkable.
That's amazing. You're taking advantage of these opportunities that came up that without all these accidents, as you said.
My middle name has become Resilience. I just I figure it out.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the women we interview, it's very much the same. It's
Right.
just like taking these opportunities and quickly shifting the perspective and making something else happen after it. It's really quite fascinating.
Exactly. That's what entrepreneurship is about, because I'm going to use that term in a broad sense. What seems like a bad experience at the time, there's always a way to shift it and turn it into a good experience.
Kind of going in that same direction, transitioning to talking about your injury that happened in 2017, I think.
Yes.
Can you talk about that and how that shifted all of your, trajectory up to that point?
My injury, we're coming on 4 years, so it's June 29th, 2017, was life-changing. It changed everything in my life, absolutely everything. And at the time, it felt devastating. And I look back, and that day was the worst day and the best day of my life simultaneously. And I'm so grateful for that experience. It's brought so many blessings that I can't even imagine would have been brought in another way. So one was that I really got so busy for 10 years in this dog music business that I wasn't playing the piano hardly at all. I really was playing so little. I was at the computer all day doing way too much on my own. And, running a small company, 2 people, it was just way too much. And I would feel guilty if I played piano during business hours. The only time I created to play piano was early morning when I was still in my pajamas, or late at night. And really, I remember one day playing at like 4 in the afternoon, and I'd feel so guilty about it. I did not realize how much I missed playing piano. And when I had this accident, so what happened is it was really a simple trip and fall, but I happened to be holding a water bottle with my ring finger of my right hand. And so I had I'll show you my teacup. So I had the water bottle like through here, and it didn't release when I fell. And so it crushed my hand so that I had 6 fractures, complicated fractures here and 1 here. So 7 fractures. These 6 needed 4 surgeries over 2 years. On top of that, I developed CRPS. CRPS is complex regional pain syndrome. And it's oftentimes you have it for life. I don't. I've been in remission I went into remission 6 months after that. And it's really tricky because you have different people have different symptoms. But my symptoms were incredible inflammation, incredible pain. It's so painful that people often dub it the suicide disease because the pain is so intense. Exposure to heat. I couldn't, it was July, and I had to have a hat on my hand. I couldn't put any sun on it. I couldn't be in crowds. I couldn't handle external noise. It's a dysfunction to your nervous system. So it's a neurological disease. So that's why everyone responds differently, because it depends how it affects your nervous system. The earlier the diagnosis, the more chance of remission from this. And when I went to my hand therapist and she realized that I had CRPS, I said, as soon as she diagnosed me, and I said, am I going to play the piano again? And she said, look at your hand. How could you? And I was devastated. And something happened to me in that moment when I realized the thing that I had forgotten that I love most in life was taken away from me. There was no way I was going to allow that to happen. So while my hand was still in a cast, I started playing with left hand only. And I fired her because I wasn't going to listen to that. I wasn't going to be playing piano again. I took a break from, I found a new medical team, except a fabulous surgeon I stayed with. And I found an expanded alternative medical team. And also at Kaiser, my medical practice, I found other people and found great help. And I was like, looking at other hand therapists. And I went to another one and I said, I've been diagnosed with CRPS. I've been told I need more surgeries. I'm doing this and that and the other thing. All I want to do is play piano. Am I going to play piano again? And she said, look at your hand. Why wouldn't you? And I said, you're hired. I stayed with her for 186 hand therapy sessions. And I took her into retirement. She retired recently. So we finished, I don't know, within the last year, right at the start of the pandemic, we finished her hand therapy. And she retired. And I am not only playing music with left hand only, which I did for a couple of years, but I'm also still doing that. But I'm also playing full repertoire with two hands. So the dog music tends to be easier, but I'm playing Rachmaninoff sonatas and Chopin sonatas and Chopin ballades and, big repertoire with both hands. So I am thrilled that I proved that first hand therapist wrong.
That is an amazing story. So inspirational. And I'm just curious, what was that like day to day for you? Like getting up, having to do this therapy, whatever you had to do, like mentally, what was this like for you each day?
It was very intense. It was a full-time job. If I was sitting in a chair, it was all about movement for me. My hand was actually stayed pretty strong because just that wasn't the challenge. The challenge was getting extension back because I couldn't reach chords on the piano that I could when I was 8 or 9 years old. I mean, it was just, I have a large hand. I can reach 10th to 11th with my left. And it wasn't the outer reach. It was the reaching, like I couldn't play most major chords and I couldn't play any minor chords at the time because this reach was so challenging. And the emotional intensity was, it was like, I had to be so conscious of what I put on my mind. I had to be so conscious of who was in my environment. Like when people said something, like I just didn't allow anyone, if someone said something to me like, oh, you're done. You're not playing piano anymore. I'd be like, are you crazy? I just want to prove them wrong. So some of them, and I had heart-to-heart conversations with friends that said, Lisa, I'm worried you have such a musical talent for shaping phrases and have such beautiful caresses at the piano. And I'm afraid you've lost that control. And I'm like, I'm not afraid, so, but here's the thing that the physical therapy was great. And the emotional therapy was playing piano. But what that hand therapist taught me has applied to every single lesson in my life, little by little. You do not focus on, because the first 6 months of this, it was incredibly emotionally painful because all I kept asking was, am I going to recover? And when am I going to recover? Someone tell me when this is over, because I want to be anywhere but here. And you cannot get through life. You can't get through any experience in life with always wanting to be somewhere else. And when you do, you miss out on the gifts that are right in front of you, that are right there. So it took me 6 months to realize it wasn't about being somewhere else, being on a different timeline. It didn't matter if someone had told me that day on June 29th, 2017, it would take me 4 years to recover. And there's things I'm still working on with my hand, but it would take me 4 years to get this long. I think I would have given up. But by staying present to the littlest rewards, the tiniest. We'd go and measure my hand, and like, a millimeter improvement, we'd celebrate. We'd have a party. And so when I got it, that it was little by little adds up, and just stay focused on where you are and just a little bit beyond where you want to go, it changed everything.
That's amazing advice, and just anyone can take that no matter what they're going through. I'm curious about the Left Hand Lemonade. So you recorded that in 2020, right? But it's all left-hand music?
Yes. So when the pandemic came in, the beginning of 2020 was the first time I went away the first year of January 2020. And it was the first time since this hand injury that I felt like, finally, I can focus on something other than my hand healing. Like, I can do something else. And so I started, even before I knew the pandemic was coming, I started preparing online courses called Piano Ninja Tricks. And the timing of the release of Piano Ninja Tricks was gold, because it just happened right at the time the pandemic was coming in, and advanced adult piano students couldn't get to their piano lessons. But in the meantime, I was getting pretty good at playing music for left hand. I was just starting to bring in my right hand. And I knew people were telling me my story was so inspirational, and people, not even musicians. I mean, I've had this huge desire now to use my passion to help coach musicians to play on, and I'm doing that also. And I'm realizing this is beyond musicians. This is like, by the time you get to a certain age in life, you have setbacks and things happen. And like, how do you continue? How do you play on? So I started, when the pandemic came in, I started a weekly Facebook Live concert series. And I called it Left Hand Lemonade, because I was writing a memoir called Left Hand Lemonade, and it's still in process. And telling my story of resilience, realizing that people really were relating to my story, no matter whether they were a musician or not. So the way the series started is a concert of always some left hand, and often some right hand. Some were only left hand, it just depended, and a little excerpt from my memoir. So that's how that started. And then the last concert of that series, which was in November 2020, I recorded live. I got a professional recording engineer in, and while I was in Facebook Live, we recorded an album, which is called Left Hand Lemonade Live, which is all left hand.
That's so cool. I'm curious what that's like, creating music or like arranging it for only left hand, and how I imagine that takes some creativity to.
There's very little that I arranged myself. There's been actually over 800 compositions written for left hand. There are some things, and a little more for the dog music when I play left hand. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that I personally arranged. But on this album, did I rearrange anything? I'm in so many projects, I can't even remember now. Is the Vivaldi, I think the Vivaldi, which I did arrange, I don't think it's on there. I don't remember right now. It's on my dog album. But the Bach Sicilian for flute was rearranged by Paul Wittgenstein. Paul Wittgenstein lost his right arm in World War I, and then the Ravel Piano Concerto was written for him. But Wittgenstein also rearranged hundreds of compositions for left hand only. He took like opera arias and string quartet movements and put them for left hand. My favorite piece on this album is the Bach Chaconne for violin, rearranged by Brahms, which he had written for Clara Schumann. That's the meatiest piece, its longest piece on the album, and I love it. Yes, it's great. I will say something though about when I first started learning music for left hand only. It was as much of an emotional challenge as a physical challenge, because the first 6 months I was like, my left side of my body ached, my neck was sore. It's very unergonomic to sit at a piano, to have the keyboard on both sides of you, to be playing left hand all over, if it's the concert music, depending on when it's written. Like the arrangement of the Bach by Brahms was written earlier, so that's really middle register and bass. The Scriabin is like, I'm playing music way up here in the highest notes of the treble, so it just depends on when it's written. But it was an emotional challenge of like, I don't see myself as left. This is temporary. Why am I learning left hand music? And then when I realized I don't make music with my fingers, I make music with my heart. It doesn't matter how many fingers are in the keys. that's when it all came together.
It's so interesting because, you know, you telling us your story, you could easily be like, wow, this woman has been through so many, you know, hard challenges. Like, that's so unfortunate. But really, you've been so fortunate because you've switched the perspective so many times to learn something from it and really get to the root of your musicianship, that they wind up being these really amazing experiences. But that took you to do that. It's really fascinating.
Thank you. So growing up, I'm the youngest of four, and my siblings always used to say, everything just happens for Lisa. Everything just happens for Lisa. And I used to get so mad when they say that, because I had this feeling inside. I didn't understand any of this back then, but it was just feeling like, it doesn't just happen. I like make it happen. You know? So it kind of feels like that. It's like, yeah, it depends how you look at it. It's I just turn things around.
And so now, in your career, what shape has it taken, like in the past year with the pandemic? Obviously you made the album, but like what else have you been up to?
Well, I switched in 2021, and I tell you, I wasn't really planning on it. It has surprised me. I pay attention to what's around me and what's needed. I thought I would be expanding piano ninja tricks, and I plan to be doing that. I love that so much. I miss it, but I've put the expansion of the online program of that on hold for a little bit. I'm teaching more piano in person, which I'm just loving because, you know, I've been fully vaccinated. My students have, it's just great. So I'm loving that, and also teaching privately online and doing some coaching of supporting musicians who have had setbacks, who have had injuries or even emotional setbacks getting back to playing. And I love doing that and hope to be doing more of that. However, I'm back right now in this moment, pretty fully focused on creating music for dogs. I'm releasing Doggone Calm Volume 1, June 25th. It'll be on all streaming channels. And the reason, here's what had me shift. Now that we're coming out of the pandemic and dogs won the doggy lottery in 2020, they had their people 24/7. Life couldn't be better. What else could they want? And now they have to adjust to being alone. I am convinced that dogs that didn't even have separation anxiety going into the pandemic are going to come out of the pandemic with separation anxiety. It's much harder for me. I have been alone with my dog for 14, 15 months. She's been my shelter in place buddy. It's really, I have my own separation stress around that because it was hard enough before the pandemic. Now it's like, it's a whole nother thing. So one is I know that there's a need for my music. Two is all these opportunities started coming my way. I have 2 appearances coming up on Dog TV. So one might have happened by the time this airs, but it's this weekend is June 12th, and another is July 4th weekend. So June 12th is all about helping our dogs adjust to their new normal and separation anxiety. And I'm on with an esteemed group of really renowned veterinarians and behaviorists and trainers, and really honored to be there and playing the piano and presenting. And also July 4th, on a program with Victoria Stillwell speaking on with sound phobias and fireworks, because that's the other huge issue with dogs. So I felt like there was a need, and all these opportunities are coming my way. I'm actually thinking of creating a Doggone Calm club to help loving dog moms really help enhance their time and create a more strengthened human animal bond using music. And I have a podcast called My Zen Pet, which is the name of my new company, and that's doing really well. And that's all about creating Zen experiences with your dog. And so I just felt like, okay, it surprised me. I did not expect to be fully focused on this. I thought this would be a little more of a side hustle, but it's kind of shifted for right now, and we'll see.
It's really great because you've actually blended all of these different parts of your life now together. Like, you're doing this coaching, you're playing with both hands again, you're also playing left hand, you're working with dogs, and you've just like blended it all together now, which is great.
Thank you. That's my goal. I feel like organically more and more of that's going to happen. Like on the dog TV, I'm playing with my left hand only. Well, each album starts, because there's going to be Doggone Calm Volume 1, 2, and 3. Each album starts with music for left hand only, because lower frequencies calm the canine nervous system. So I haven't seen the presentation yet. I only know what they filmed and what they took from my Instagram videos. And there's going to be a story in there about my right hand recovery and all the hand therapy and all that, and how it, reminded me that of all the research that I've studied on music and dogs, that yes, lower frequencies calm the canine nervous system. Play some music for left hand only for the dogs.
I'm definitely gonna have to check out that podcast because I have a Prozac pup who needs some calming.
Fantastic. So it is a micro podcast, meaning it's short episodes about, I think the longest one's 8 minutes, or between 5 and 10. And it's a music excerpt from one of the volumes of Doggone Calm and a Zen behavior tip on how to create a Zen environment at home, and also like out in nature, how to take a silent meditation walk with your dog. And really what it comes down to is how to expand time with your dog. The only thing every dog lover hates is their lives are too short. And so what can I do to expand that time for people? So how you expand time is you live in the now, you live in the present moment. That expands time. So that's what I create for people, along with creating time to just sit down and listen to the music together, because the music is not only for the dogs, it's just as calming for the people.
I actually, when I was back at home a few weeks ago, and my dog has also severe anxiety, and I've been trying to figure that out. And I actually put on, because on YouTube you have a couple videos, and so I put it on and I just like kind of observed. And of course he passed out. And then my mom came home from the grocery store, and she was like, "Oh my God, he didn't even come up, like run up to greet me. Like he's just out."
I love it. I love it. That's great.
We've learned so much from your story, but we want to ask what advice you'd have for our audience.
Very good question. 2 things. One is, when I used to be in the music school, and I had I'm thinking of one in particular, really, really talented musician. And he was debating whether to go to music school. And he said, "I'm not going to go to music school. I don't want to starve." And I said, "Yeah, you'll starve if you have one thing in mind, to be a concert pianist and to perform Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and all of the others. And that's your one thing. But if you take some business courses, and it doesn't have to be even in college, just online business courses, and you really pay attention to what's in your life, and you get really creative, there's always a way to combine that with another interest and create a career out of it. And so pay attention to create your own path, because the world needs your path. And the other thing I'd say is, don't let anyone tell you to not do what you want to do, to not play your instrument, that you're not good enough, that you can't do this, you can't do that. They don't know you, and they don't know what you're capable of. And play on is my motto. And 2 mottos: play on and screw perfect and just make music. I wouldn't be playing the 2 hands if I held on to my perfectionism. I miss notes. I can't reach things. It doesn't matter. I put my heart first, and that's all that matters.
That's beautiful advice. Thank you so much for that, and for this whole interview. It's been great to talk with you, and I'm so excited for our listeners to take this all in.
Yeah,
thank you, Kelsey and Julianne. It's been a pleasure for me.
Yeah, I think your life has just been a true testament to your wisdom and your advice. Like, you really have lived what you speak. Like, it's really amazing to hear this.